It's 8:14 in the morning, August 6th, 1945. A single American bomber streaks across Hiroshima's clear blue skies. America is inching towards a total victory in the Pacific. The Japanese are preparing a ferocious defense of the four home islands, but the US has a new weapon that it believes could shock Japan into surrendering. On the ground, though, the city's home to hundreds of thousands of people. People like Dr. Michihiko Aoki, who just got home from the hospital. His brother, Hideo, is asleep in the next room. His wife, Yaiko-san, is making tea in the kitchen. Aoki is exhausted, but he's not the only one who's worried about air raids. Across town, Pastor Kiyoshi Matsuda has been up since dawn. He left his wife and newborn son to move items out of the Hiroshima Methodist Church. He's going to store them at a friend's house, who's farther from the city center. At the same time, below the B-29 Superfortress plane, the bomb bay doors pop open and expose an atomic bomb. Just as Mr. Matsuda unloads another box, the atomic bomb nicknamed Little Boy falls from the bay and begins its roaring 30,000-foot descent. The plane makes a sharp turn, veering to avoid the powerful shockwaves, and it's already 10 miles away when the bomb detonates. A blinding flash suddenly bursts through the morning. The shockwaves travel from the city center at a rate of 2 miles per second. Matsuda is just 5 miles from the hypocenter. Time seems to slow down. Out of the corner of his eye, he sees some large rocks on one side of the garden. Matsuda throws himself behind them. He buries his head in his hands. Suddenly, a powerful force like nothing he's ever felt shoots past him. But he stays pressed against the garden stones, and he's miraculously spared. When he felt safe to raise his head, he was shocked by what he saw. The world was dark, and clouds of dust and smoke have created a twilight around him. With uneasy steps, Matsuda walks to the hill at the end of the garden. He thinks the first American bombs have fallen right on his head. But when he reaches the hilltop, he looks on in horror. The destruction is beyond belief. The booming industrial city has been turned into a wasteland in a fraction of a second. Matsuda thinks of his wife and son. They're somewhere down there among the ruins, maybe injured or worse. He needs to find them. A brilliant light flashes for an instant in Dr. Aoki's living room. Then everything begins to creak and move. Aoki dives out of the house as it begins to cough out dust and debris. He flees onto the road and almost immediately stumbles over a human leg lying in the street. Then looking back at his house, he watches it collapse. Had his brother escaped? There was a back door near his room. But all of a sudden, a terrible pain shoots through his neck. The pain is so strong, he forgets everything else. Aoki gropes at his neck with his hand. It's suddenly wet with blood. He has to get to the hospital, but a flesh wound in his thigh is making it difficult to walk. After a few more steps, he falls to the ground. Dr. Aoki lies there. He would have died there too, but his wife catches sight of him. The hospital is only a few hundred meters away. She runs there as fast as she can and recruits 2 of its nurses. But the entrance is already bursting with survivors, so they pass him on the stretcher through a side window. The hospital is already in complete pandemonium. All the nurse can do is coat Aoki's injuries in antiseptic. He's looking at the adjoining building through the window when smoke suddenly begins to pour from its 3rd story.
火事だ! 火事だ!
Aoki cries. Doctors and nurses run through the hallways, shouting for the victims to quickly evacuate. On the outskirts of town, Matsuda runs onto the street in panic. He's one of the only people heading into the city. Many walk like zombies to keep their burnt arms from touching their sides. On the highway, he sees a man standing completely still. All of his clothes have burnt off, and he's holding something in his hand. As Matsuda passes, the man turns his face. One of his eyes is completely missing. Matsuda reels back in horror. He's frozen in place, holding his own eyeball in his hand. He plans to go to the church, but fire has already cut off the route, so he runs north of the city, above where the river splits into 6 branches, and he's exhausted when he reaches the riverbank. But Mr. Matsuda throws himself into the strong current. He presses on, but he feels his strength giving out. Mustering all of his energy, he paddles vigorously, but the other side is just too far. With his last bit of strength, he swings himself up to tread the water. At the same time, his toe grazes sand. Matsuda's just set foot on the river floor. He's going to make it. The next part of his path takes him to the very heart of Hiroshima, the East Parade Ground. The morning the bomb went off, thousands of shirtless soldiers are performing their exercises outside. They're recognizable now because of their burns. The soldiers are charred from their waist up, but their legs are unburnt. They beg for water, but Matsuda doesn't have any. Instead, he tiptoes over people, apologizing to them as he goes. But one survivor points to a bucket nearby. Matsuda picks it up, but there's no water close at hand. The survivor asks again. Matsuda apologizes.
ごめんなさい.
And the man falls back on the ground. He passes ruined military installations until he reaches the river bordering the Asano Park. Lush and well-shaded, this 12-acre park has been filling with victims since the morning. Many are too burned for anyone to recognize, but Matsuda scans their faces on the off chance that they're his family. He feels dozens of eyes fixing themselves on him. He's the only person standing up on the bank of the river. The heat of the fires at his back, the powerful currents before him. He needs to do something. He takes the bucket down to the river and begins hauling water for them. There are just too many people though, and they risk being consumed in flames. Back at the hospital, Dr. Aoki is shuttled into the garden. He's propped up against a tree, surrounded by dozens of other victims. There's an eerie silence that's only broken by the shriek of the fire and the winds. He scans the shocked faces for his brother, but he isn't there. The fire is spreading, and embers are setting the garden on fire. Aoki's friends grab his stretcher, but his mind's beginning to fade. He doesn't remember what happens next. Back in the Asano Park, Matsuda abandons the injured and runs along the riverbank. On his side of the river, he sees a small ferry boat. Maybe he can use it to move people to the other side. But as he approaches the punt, he's stunned to see 5 strange shapes on its floor. They hardly resemble people, but 5 charred bodies are sprawled out in the boat. But the fire keeps creeping through the park, and he makes up his mind. When the bodies are out, Matsuda presses up against the boat with all of his might. Miraculously, he forces it into the water, but there's no oars. All Matsuda can do is use a thick piece of bamboo to punt the boat along. The ferry's big enough to move 10 or 12 of the worst injured across the river at once, but the work is draining. On one of these trips, he sees someone watching him out of the corner of his eye. It's a woman. Finally, she asks.
松田
He turns his head to look closer.
私を教会の小野です。水をください。
He brings over the bucket and pours her water.
話があるの。奥さんを見かけたの。教会のそばで見たの。でも他にも。
But she's too exhausted. She can't say anything else. Matsuda returns to rowing. When he looks back a few moments later, she's closed her eyes. His wife's alive. But what else was Mrs. Ono trying to tell him? The possibilities seemed endless. Near dawn, Dr. Aoki hears the sound of a man moving around his hospital bed.
Hideo?
All of a sudden, the man reaches out and touches his hand, but it's a weird, shy pat. He does it again and then moves his hand up. He pats and gropes Aoki up to his face. Then finally, Aoki says,
どいて、どいて.
It's just a blind man who's wandered into his area and can't find his way out. But Aoki can't get his brother out of his mind. When his wife arrives, they decide to return to the house immediately, but it's been burnt to a crisp. There's no sign of his brother though, and it gives Aoki some hope that he may have escaped. So they begin to dig. In the north section of the house though, he finds buttons from his brother's shirt. Under another layer of rubble, there's a single leg bone. He digs deeper, but there's nothing else. All that remains of his brother are 3 burnt buttons and a crumbling bone. Near dawn the next morning, the rising tide wakes Matsuda. The sun's coming up, and the sky's clearer than yesterday. He decides to head for the church. The road is so empty, and the surroundings are so flat. He feels like he's walking through a graveyard. Hiroshima had been home to about 245,000 people the day before, but now 60 to 80,000 of them are dead. In spite of the ruin, Matsuda's relieved when he catches sight of his wife. He walks up and embraces her. She hands him the baby, but he can feel it's a little stiffer than usual. He opens up the blanket and puts his back hand against the baby's cheek. He's cold.
教会の下敷きになり、赤ちゃんと片手で瓦礫を押しのけ、ゆっくりと穴を開けた。燃え盛る炎、おの音が聞こえた。ようやく赤ちゃんが通り抜けられるほどの穴ができ、赤ちゃんが窒息死していたとしたスターのは、そのずっと後のことだった。
His wife falls silent, and Matsuda hugs her closely. Then they turn with their baby towards the hospital. As they walk through Hiroshima,